As Laura mentioned, I'm Todd Trepanier, the Program Administrator for the Washington State Department of Transportation for the Alaskan Way Viaduct Project. I just want to start out by saying that we're going to start a call-in line every day at noon starting tomorrow. Laura will be getting that number out to all of you. This will be similar to what was done during the Skagit River Bridge replacement. So this will be a number that you can all call into every day, Monday through Friday at noon. And myself or one of my direct reports will be there to answer questions live. And based on availability, Chris Dixon or maybe someone from STP will be with us as well. So we want to increase the communication on this because we understand this is an important issue to everyone and all the residents here. So with that, I'll just open it up and see what is on your minds.
How long is this project going to be delayed?
We haven't made that determination yet. We're, as you know, we're stopped when we had the longshoreman picket line. When we resumed tunneling after that point in time up until December 6th, I believe we tunneled for about 135 days, or 135 calendar days had elapsed since we commenced tunneling on July 31st. We planned on going about 900 feet during that time period, and or 1,000 feet, and we actually covered that amount of ground despite the longshoreman picket line delay. So up until December 6th, we were more or less on our original schedule, even with the month-long stoppage that we had during the longshoreman picket delay. So since December 6th, you know, we've been stopped. We tried to restart the tunneling. The thing that takes over the critical path once the tunneling is complete is the tunnel interior structures, and then following behind that is the electrical and mechanical work in the tunnel, followed by the systems commissioning. And we've got a lag between the start of the preceding activity and the start of the succeeding activity. We weren't going to start tunnel interior structures until we were in 2,000 feet. We have the opportunity to start that earlier while we're down now, because we do have 1,000 feet of tunnel to work in. We planned on stopping at what's known as Safe Haven 3 for an extended period of time, primarily to perform work in the launch pit with the removal of the launch frame and the temporary rings in the tunnel. We're taking this opportunity to do that work now, which would shorten that time period stop at Safe Haven 3 when we ultimately get there. We've planned the work on a 5 day per week, 2 shifts per day, 10 hours per shift. That's 20 hours per day for 5 days, which is 100 hours in a week. If we went to a 7/24, that'd be 168 hours in a week, so that'd be a 68% increase in the available work hours per week. When you go to an around-the-clock operation, you're not quite as efficient, so each hour you're working over the 100 hours, you're not necessarily picking up an hour on the schedule, but you do have the ability to recover some time pretty quickly. So we can't forecast what the delay might be. What we really need to do is determine what we need to do at this juncture and how soon we can resume tunneling.
And what are you looking at now as far as options? There's 2, right? Can you briefly speak about those 2 options, replacing or fixing the seals?
Right. The machine's designed to perform virtually anything that needs to be done to the TBM from underground. And it's designed that way because you obviously don't have any access from the surface if you're in downtown Seattle, 200 feet below the surface. Right now we're 50 feet below the surface. We're very shallow. We're in an area that is more or less ideal for accessing the machine from the surface. There is a time associated with constructing that access, but once constructed, you can perform the work much more quickly than we would do if we had to access it through the tunnel machine underground, basically because we'd be working in free air or atmospheric pressure as opposed to having to perform the work through a series of hyperbaric interventions, as we recently did with when we went in there to inspect cutting tools and clean the cutter head. So we're still evaluating our options, but the determining factor will be what needs to be done and what's the safest and most expedient way of accomplishing that.
And a decision expected on which way you're going to go by the end of the week still?
We hope to know. We've got principals from Hitachi Zosen coming in tomorrow to meet with us tomorrow afternoon. Some of the Hitachi Zosen people that were here have gone back to Japan. Some of our people are going to go to Japan. Others are coming here. So there's a joint effort between STP senior management, Hitachi Zosen senior management, our tunneling team, and the tunnel machine experts that we have, and the ones that Hitachi Zosen has. We're all addressing this problem, but there's a lot to evaluate before we can make a determination as to what needs to be done. The most important thing is that whatever we do, we want to make sure that the machine's 100% and that we've identified what caused the problem to occur so we can prevent it from occurring again as we move forward with the tunneling.
Chris, let me ask you a question just to clarify. Is it, you know the seals are broken. Do you know yet whether or not the bearing is functioning?
We believe the bearing is functioning. From what we've been able to determine, the bearing is fine. The bearing manufacturer will be coming here to recertify the bearing. At that time, we'll know for sure whether the bearing is 100% or if it has any damage.
Chris, today the governor talked about the cost overruns, and these are his exact words. He says, we are going to insist that either the tunnel gets built on time or the contractor is going to be financially responsible to the citizens of the state for every single penny of cost overruns. How would you respond to what the governor said today?
Well, my response would be that we entered into a contract. It's a design-build contract. The contract allocates risk between the parties, that being WSDOT and Seattle Tunnel Partners. It identifies what things would be compensable to the contractor, what things are not compensable to the contractor. And we're having discussions with WSDOT about the contractual issues, and if the contract provides for us to be compensated for some aspect of the cost associated with this delay, then we would pursue that recovery of costs under the contract.
So you're already talking about possible overruns at this point?
Well, we're talking about contractual issues. We've advised WSDOT that if there's a means for recovering costs under the contract, that we're going to pursue those means. But again, we have to, both of us really need to engage in fact-finding discussions, and we have to agree on what occurred and why it occurred and whose risk that is under the contract before we can make those determinations.
The governor said that
And as was mentioned, there's really no indication yet that the costs associated with this specific issue would be borne by the taxpayers. But as Chris mentioned, there is a contract between us, and it is a complicated contract, and there is a dividing of risk. And so the contractor does have the right to make sure they're allowed to pursue whatever is allowed in that contract. But on this specific incident, so far at this time, we don't see any indication that it would be borne by the taxpayers. But STP still has the right to look through that contract and to ask for any means that is allowed by that contract.
So you can't say for sure that it wouldn't end up costing taxpayers?
I would say for sure what we need to do is follow the contract.
And Chris, what's your reaction to that? Because the state is saying there's no evidence to suggest that the state or taxpayers would bear the cost overruns.
Well,
Do you think there's evidence that they could or should?
we believe that there's evidence, but again, it's something that takes further study and analysis. And if we feel that we have a valid case under the contract, that entitles us to compensation, we'll present that case to WSDOT and let them make their determination.
On the flip side, is there a penalty provision? I mean, Todd, is there a way that WSDOT would assess a penalty against STP? And when would that kick in and what would it be?
There are liquidated damage penalties in the contract if the work is not completed by certain milestones, and that's towards the end of the contract when those are assessed. There's also a bonus in there for completing ahead of schedule. But we're not at the point, we've not heard from STP any schedule modifications that believe that we're at a point to be calculating those. Again, as we've mentioned, the scheduling is the responsibility of STP, and we've asked them to give us a schedule once they know their work forward plan, and we fully expect that they're going to give us that schedule. And it's still too premature then to talk about what that might mean for damages or bonus impacts.
But we're obviously talking about months of delay, right, is what you guys have said about this current situation. Is it even possible to make up that lost time for a schedule?
Well, I think I answered that question earlier. We've got some things that we can do to recover schedule. We don't know what the extent of this delay will be because we don't know exactly what needs to be done and how we're going to go about doing that. But once that's known and once we determine how much schedule time we can recover, then we'll be able to determine whether there's a delay to contract completion or not.
But it will be months, the delay.
We don't know that yet. It'll be months to get the TBM up and running again, but whether that translates into months of delay to contract completion remains to be seen.
You know,
Let's go back one
wonder
step,
why
just from
not-
WSDOT's perspective. We haven't heard you say it yet. So we're at the point now where there will be cost overruns. That's what you're saying today.
No, there's no indication of that at this time. And as I mentioned previously, I said there's no indication from STP. I did not say there's no evidence. So there's no indication from STP that this is going to be borne by the taxpayers. And it's too premature to talk about if there's any cost overruns associated with this. As I think we've mentioned in previous contacts with the media, this is a design-build contract, which essentially means WSDOT is the customer, and we've hired STP as the contractor to perform this work. They've entered in with a contract with us to do that work. Part of that is to supply the tunnel boring machine and complete this tunnel. We expect them to do that, and we don't have any reason to suspect that they don't plan on doing that in accordance with the contract.
Did you see the governor's press conference today by any chance?
No, I was busy doing some other work. So
He was pretty
not able to
fired
see.
up, and he didn't come across as feeling as if this was premature to talk about cost overruns when we're talking about taxpayer money. So whether or not it's premature from DOT and the tunnel partners standpoint, the governor definitely talked about it, and he talked about it at length. So he does not feel it's premature. Yet you still do?
Just as stated, at this point in time, we don't see any cost associated with this issue would be borne by the taxpayers.
Well, have you used up the fund yet? There was in the contract, you have money set aside for just this kind of problem underground. Has that been used up?
No, it is not.
And that, I'm sorry, how much was that so far?
There's several different contingency amounts associated with the contract, and they have not been used up at this point in time.
So you know the price so far of what this delay underground, this work has cost, because you know that you haven't used it up yet. Is that what you mean by no?
This work that's going on right now is not associated with that contingency fund. At this point in time, this work is part of STP's contractual obligation.
Chris, are you?
Earlier, we were told that there is a contingency fund for if the machine stops running underground. Is that not the case?
There's a fund in the contract for $40 million that covers differing site conditions and covers additional hyperbaric interventions. And what we have in our bid is 1,440 hours of hyperbaric intervention. So as we tunnel along, if we exceed that amount and we exceed it for certain reasons, then that fund would be accessed to pay for those additional hyperbaric interventions in a similar way as if we encountered a differing site condition, and that's deemed a differing site condition in accordance with the contract documents, then we would be entitled to compensation for the additional costs associated with that, which would be paid out of that $40 million fund. But the fund is there just for those exclusive purposes. When the contract's complete, whatever's left in the fund, we get 75% of that fund, and WSDOT gets 25%. So if we never use the fund, at the end of the project, we get $30 million of that, and $10 million goes to WSDOT. So I think that's the contingency fund that you're speaking of. And
You haven't dipped into that yet?
No.
Okay. But that's what it's for hyperbaric.
It's for additional hyperbaric interventions over 1,440 hours, and for associated costs, or costs associated with any differing site conditions that are encountered, as long as they're deemed differing site conditions under the contract requirements.
I'm hearing people ask, that you're still in warranty, why not give it back? If it's the lemon, if it doesn't work, it's got problems, don't take it on.
Well, our supply contract with Hitachi Zosen has a provisional reception period, which was the first 20 rings we installed in the tunnel, or about 130 feet. And then final acceptance at 200 rings, which is 1,300 feet. Right now, we're at ring 150. So we haven't reached the point where we have the final acceptance of the machine. And that's really tied to a payment milestone in their contract. The last 10% of the machine is paid for once we successfully get to ring 200 and everything's working as it's supposed to be working. So we obviously aren't there yet. We need to get there for Hitachi Zosen to receive that last 10% payment under their contract. But even beyond that, there are guarantees and warranties in our supply contract that extend well beyond the forecast completion date for the tunneling. And under those warranties and guarantees, Hitachi Zosen is responsible for repairing or replacing anything that goes wrong with the tunnel boring machine. So they're with us all the way through the tunnel drive under the terms and conditions of the supply contract, but they're particularly with us at this stage because we haven't reached the point of final acceptance of the machine. And the contract was set up that way just for these types of eventualities, and we designed the project in this way. As you know, we're tunneling up Alaskan Way in what we call the tunnel in the box. It's really a test section to test out and commission the machine, make sure everything's working all right before we get to that 200th ring. When we get to Safe Haven 3, which is another 40 or 50 rings along the alignment, that's where we make our final stop and checks before we go under the viaduct and then go deep underneath the city of Seattle. So if something like this is going to happen, this is the time that it should happen on the project. And the thing you need to know is there's been many tunnel projects where they've had to replace the seals, they've had to replace the main bearings, and similarly, there's many projects where the TBM has driven the whole tunnel without any issues with the main bearing or with the seals. So what's happening here is not unusual in the world of tunnel boring machine tunneling.
What if you
Is
find
it
out that...
possible that there was a design flaw to Bertha in the first place? Is that possible? Are you guys looking into that?
Could you repeat that question?
Is it possible that there was a design flaw to Bertha in the first place? Are you guys looking into that?
Well, Hitachi Zosen's looking at the design of the machine, at the manufacturing process. We haven't made that determination. The fact that the machine performed very well in its initial tunneling. Like I said, we achieved the same footage in the first 135 days that we planned, even though we were stopped for a month with the longshoreman picket line. So the machine performed and advanced much faster than we were anticipating that it would during those first 135 days. So it's not like the machine hasn't gotten out of the starting blocks and hasn't performed. It's we're at a point now where there's been some damage to the seals, and that's something that needs to be corrected before we move on.
And what kind of unusual, this, you kind of indicated before that this is something that you maybe plan for in these kind of contracts. It's kind of something that could be expected, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a zero probability that it's going to happen, but it's not 100% probability either.
What happens if Bertha can't be fixed?
That doesn't even enter into the equation, because we're sure that it can be fixed. Like I said, it was performing well. It has something that needs to be fixed at this point before we move forward. We get it back to the condition that it was in when it was performing well, and we should be able to proceed forward according to our plan.
Will Hitachi technicians be the ones to do the repair the seal or the bearing?
They'll be deciding on what repair needs to be done. They'll be involved with the repair. We have our own mechanics, electricians, tunnel workers that would participate in that repair process. All depends what the nature and extent of the work is. We would pick the best people from Hitachi's Ocean or from our own forces to perform that work.
And under the warranty you mentioned before, I mean, what part of the repairs will they actually pay for? Will they pay for the parts? I mean, how will that distribution of costs break down?
Well, that's something we'll have to discuss with Hitachi's Ocean.
From an engineering point of view, it has been reported that there's damage to the seal, that there's been some lubricant and some grit or sand we've read reports of exiting the seal. There was reports that it's been run up to a high temperature at least twice. Is it possible at all that the bearing is not damaged? It seems pretty unlikely, doesn't it, that the bearing could still be used given those conditions, doesn't it?
Based on what we've been able to determine, the bearing is okay. I said earlier that the bearing manufacturer is coming out here to perform a more detailed inspection and to recertify the bearing. At that time, we'll know if it's 100% okay or not.
Chris, what do you know so far about what factors might have caused the seals to break in the first place? What are the primary kind of suspects that you're investigating?
There's a variety of reasons why the seals could be compromised or could fail. And again, we're not speculating on those. We know what have caused bearing seals to fail in the past on other projects in other machines. But again, that's part of the investigation that we're doing, and we need to find the root cause of that so that we prevent a reoccurrence as we tunnel forward.
Along those lines, do you know anything at this point about whether or not the seal breakage and the clogged cutter head are connected? Did one cause the other?
Again, that would just be speculation.
Can WSDOT say with certainty that that very pipe did not cause those seals to break?
Yeah, WSDOT believes that the well casing has nothing to do with the seal issue.
Does STP think that could have been a factor?
We haven't ruled out the pipe as a contributing factor to the problem that we've had with the TBM.
Has WSDOT been working on or adjusting, or has there been talk about adjusting budgets concerning risk in the future? From this point forward, are you adjusting anything that might point toward risk management in the future of the project?
No, there's no changes to the risk management and budget management of this project. As Chris has mentioned, some of these type of issues, they don't want them to happen on these projects, but they're known to have occurred. And that is one of the reasons on this contract that the contractor was required to have an extra bearing also manufactured. So there is a bearing that is in existence if it is needed. And so that what you're seeing here still, we're not modifying the way the contract is being managed yet.
Chris, can you explain why going through from the surface is faster and perhaps a better option to fix the problem?
Well, if you're going in from the tunnel, you're coming in from the back side of the cutter head, and access is very, very difficult. It's a very cramped environment. There's a lot of things that need to be removed and moved out of the way in order to access the area that you want to gain access to. And then to the extent that you need to go out into the chamber behind the cutter head, you need to do that through hyperbaric interventions, which is all of you know from the recent ones we did, those are very short duration type activities. If you go down from the surface, you have more room to work, there's less things to remove to get out of your way, and you're in a free air or atmospheric environment where people can work regular shifts and perform much more efficiently.
Is it safe to say you were leaning toward that option?
Depends on what the extent of the repairs is. There's a trade-off. If it's a short duration operation that can be performed by a few people, then it would make sense to do a hyperbaric intervention, just like we did when we went in and inspected the cutter head. You wouldn't dig a shaft just to go down and inspect the cutter head and clean tunnel muck out of the openings and inspect the chamber, because that's relatively short duration that you can do in a series of hyperbaric interventions, which is what we did. If we decided to sink a shaft to do that work, we'd probably still be sinking the shaft to do that work, and we completed those hyperbaric interventions some weeks ago.
How long would it take to go down from the top of that shaft to actually get to the cutter head? Is that you were saying it's a faster option, but now I'm not sure.
Well, when you get to the point where you have to perform the work, you can perform much quicker. It just takes you longer to get to the starting point because you have to sink a shaft to access that work area.
What's your view on how the cutter head got so clogged? I know last week Matt Preedy suggested one possibility might be the way the machine was operated. What's your view on that?
We believe that there was pretty significant damage to the cutting tools, and what the cutting tools do is they protrude out from the cutter head and carve the soil as the cutter head rotates and loosen that soil so that when the soil breaks away from the face, it flows through the openings of the cutter head. And if the cutting tools are damaged or severely worn, then you're really just pushing like a flat plate up against the soil that's got some openings in it, but nothing that can cut and loosen the soil that allows it to move through the openings of the cutter head. So you're pushing a plate basically against a face of soil and no ability to cut or loosen that soil, and you're spinning that plate, so you're just relying on the pressure of the machine to basically have that material flow through the openings in an extruded fashion, like squeezing tube out of a toothpaste out of a tube. And since it's not flowing through there and it's not loose coming through because it hasn't been loosened by the cutting tools, you're just getting a block of soil being shoved through, and that makes the clogging of those openings much more likely than if you have the cutting tools on the face of the cutter head cutting the soil as the machine's designed to do.
What damage caused by the pipe?
We believe the cutting tools were damaged by the pipe.
Can you see the cutting tools? Can you see evidence that they were damaged?
Yes.
You're able to see?
Yes, when we first stopped, we went up the spokes of the cutter head. As you might know, they're large enough so that you can go up and you can change specific tools from within the spokes. You can rotate them in, change them, rotate them back out. but there's a variety of tools that are not accessible in going through the spokes. You have to actually get into the chamber behind the cutter head, go up to the openings, go to the front of the openings, clear the dirt away, and inspect those tools. So we changed a significant number of tools by going through the spokes, and then when we did the hyperbaric interventions, we changed more cutting tools on the cutter head.
What does WSDOT think? Did they have a thought on what damaged those cutters?
No, the maintenance of the cutter tools is the responsibility of STP, and to manage and be observing them as they mine is the responsibility of STP.
So, but if that damage was potentially caused by the steel pipe, what gives you the confidence to say that you don't believe that was a factor in the damage to the machine?
Yeah, as we've mentioned, the well casing is, we believe the responsibility of that is STP's, and we just have our own independent experts that are reviewing the situation, and we're bringing on some more experts to look at this in addition to the ones we already have, and they have advised us that they do not believe a well casing could do that.
I think we're sensing from the two of you that there's clear disagreement over liability and who needs to pay and how much will ultimately need to be paid.
Well,
Do you sense that between yourselves?
No, I don't think so. I think we both just have our own independent thoughts and theories as to what may have caused the machine to stop initially. And I don't think either of us have gathered enough facts to convince the other one of our position. So there's still more fact-finding and study and discussion to be done. But at some point, we're going to reach agreement on what caused it and where the responsibility lies, and then we'll move forward from that point.
What seals damage
How do
did
you
you have
answer
on
that?
the machine?
And if we do continue to disagree, that is not unusual between a customer and a contractor, and there are mechanisms within the contract that are be followed to resolve those differences.
Can you tell us again how you're so confident that taxpayers won't be paying for this, and yet neither of you agree on what caused it or who should pay? Todd?
As I mentioned, we believe that the well casing itself, if that is the issue that STP is bringing up, that the responsibility to know about that and take care of it was STP's.
Have each of your parties retained legal?
And they have a right to
Advice
feel
on
that
this?
way because we haven't presented a convincing case as of this point. Like I said, it's just theories and our thoughts, and there's many other things that need to fall in place before we feel we've got a convincing argument with respect to that. But all I'm saying is we have not eliminated that as a contributing factor. But to prove that it's a contributing factor, we as STP need to do much more to prove that and convince the state of that.
Has the machine been operated properly?
Yes.
Todd, do you agree?
It would be too premature for me to speculate on that. That's one of the reasons for bringing in the experts to review all the information.
How many experts have you retained and what are their names?
I don't have their specific names right now. We've brought on a few different ones, and we are still assembling a new task force panel.
Are they getting access to everything? Are you giving them access? Is everybody talking to one another on this?
Yes, the STP has been very forthcoming. Anytime we have brought someone in that wants to look at information or wants to view the machine, they're very willing to accommodate.
Where is the spare bearing right now, and is it being shipped to Seattle? Are there plans to ship it to Seattle?
I don't know.
You don't know where the spare bearing is?
I know that we have a spare bearing. As to its exact location, I don't know, but I know that it's readily available in the event that we need to have it here to replace the existing main bearing.
Our
There's a
understanding-
provision in the contract that we have to have a spare main bearing precisely for this type of reason. So again, it's something that wasn't even unanticipated by WSDOT because they put in the contract that we need to have a spare main bearing.
It's our understanding it's overseas, and the shipping time would not be pulled up, but because by the time it was determined that the bearing was needed, there's still enough work that needs to be done to actually access it and swap it out that would match the shipping time to get it here.
So that bearing, that's interesting that there's a spare bearing, and it's going to be difficult enough if you have to replace it where Bertha is sitting right now. What was the plan going to be, or what is the plan going to be if you hit a glacial rack or something deeper downtown where the cutter face is even less accessible than it is now?
The machine's designed to replace the main bearing from inside the tunnel. It's complicated and difficult, but the machine is designed so that that can be accomplished if it needs to be accomplished.
And again, this has been done in other tunneling projects around the world where they've had bearings compromised in the middle of a tunnel run, and they've had to replace the bearing from inside the machine.
Is there a single main bearing in this
Yes.
place? So just one?
It's a big bearing.
Any bearings around the world been compromised this early in the project?
Yes.
The high temperature reading, was that because of the seal problem, or was that, it is?
We don't know yet.
So it could be something else.
It could be something else.
So in which case we have a clogged cutter head, a broken seal, and a high temperature reading.
Yes.
Wow. What are the other options what might have caused the temperature problem?
Well, friction usually causes temperature. So if the cutter head's not cutting, you're pushing this plate against the face and rotating it, and it's just rubbing against the dirt instead of cutting into the dirt. So that creates friction there. In the main bearing and the rotation of the cutter head, the seals are there. They're filled with grease. They're to lubricate the space between a rotating metal piece and a stationary metal piece. And if those are damaged in some way, and there's some friction introduced there, because the seals have been compromised and they're not holding the grease in that gap, you can generate heat that way. So there's a variety of moving parts on the TBM. There's parts that move against another part. So when two things come in contact that shouldn't necessarily be in contact, that will increase the heat. So it could have happened inside the machine where the seals and grease are acting to keep those two adjoining pieces of metal from coming into contact with each other or creating friction, which would create heat. In a similar way, that the cutting tools on the cutter head are there to scrape the dirt as the cutter head rotates, so the face of the cutter head isn't shoved up against the dirt and creating friction as the cutter head rotates.
Excuse me, the print media wasn't here from the beginning, so you might have mentioned it. As far as how long now will the delay be? Have you pretty much determined how many months now? 6 months, 7 months?
No, we haven't made that determination.
What's your ballpark guess this morning?
That's all it'd be, is a ballpark, yes.
For those of us who weren't here at the beginning, because there was some confusion about the time, could you just go through what you said at the beginning of your statements? Can you just get us up to speed on where we are right now?
Well, where we are right now is there's Hitachi Zosen representatives here. Some of the ones that were here have gone back to Japan to their headquarters manufacturing facility there. Some of our people are headed there as well. There's principals from Hitachi Zosen arriving tomorrow to meet with us tomorrow afternoon. So this is being looked at by STP management. It's being looked at by our tunnel team here in Seattle and the Hitachi Zosen people that are on the ground here and have access to the machine. And then there's a group of folks in Japan also addressing the issue.
And Mayor Murray said on KOW this morning that 5 seals have been compromised. Is that something does that sound right? 5 seals?
We believe that 5 seals could have been compromised, yes.
How many seals are there?
Well, there's a set of 5 outer seals, and then there's multiple sets of seals, but these ones that are in question, there's a set of 5 seals there.
It's like a seal assembly, and it has 5 pieces within it, but basically the seal assembly is compromised.
Are these pictures over here relevant?
Where's the seals?
Yeah, they're relevant. These are the seals here. And if you looked at them in cross-section view, we have a few of these. So what this shows is a seal with multiple webs in it here, a second seal with multiple webs, and then 3 seals here with single webs. So that's what you're saying here. Here's a multiple web seal that's shown here. Here's the next one, and then here's the 3 single ones that you see here. So this piece is this piece here that rotates, that's fixed, and then this piece out here rotates around this center core. So these are the seals that have been compromised.
What's that below?
That's a cutter drive unit that sits over the top of that and rotates.
And you think it's the pipe that did that?
That damaged the seals?
Yeah.
No, we think it's a pipe that damaged the cutting tools on the cutter head. So this is a picture of the cutter head. All these red and yellow and black things that you see on the cutter head are the cutting tools. So you can see there's a lot of them here, and they protrude out, and as the cutter head rotates, they scrape the material so it falls into the openings. That's what I was describing earlier. These are the cutting tools. Now, these spokes here, these large ones, these 8 spokes, these are the ones where we can go in from behind, inside the machine, crawl up, and we can change these ones that you see in the center. But these scraper bits, all of these red things that are on both sides of each arm, because the cutter head rotates in 2 directions. It rotates clockwise. So it's rotating this way. The leading edge here is scraping the soil and knocking it into the openings. When it rotates the other way, these on the other side of the spoke are the leading edge, scraping the soil and allowing it to go into the opening. So if these are damaged enough, and even if a couple are damaged, you'll get a band of soil around where the cutting tool is damaged that's hard, that's not being cut by the cutter head. So that portion of the cutter head is just pushing against the soil and not cutting into the soil.
Well, Chris, it sounds like if we're putting together what you're saying, you believe that the pipe caused damage to the cutter heads, which then let in a lot of soil into the cutter head, and that's what might have led to the problems with the seal. Do you think is it all connected, perhaps?
We're still studying that, but we think that created friction, which created heat, which could have resulted in damage to the seals. But again, it's something that we have to prove to WSDOT. And right now, it's just a theory that we have. And so all I'm really saying is we haven't ruled out the pipe as a contributing factor. But how it contributed, we're still looking at that. And that's just one of the theories we have as to how it could have contributed to the problem.
So what if you do prove that to WSDOT? What does that mean for the contract? Does that mean WSDOT is on the hook for something? Or?
No. That still needs to be sorted out in the contract, because as Todd mentioned earlier, there are references in the contract to the existence of that pipe. So, I mean, that's a contractual aspect that we would need to address with WSDOT.
And for those of us who were not here earlier, can you just say whether this tunneling project was supposed to be completed by the end of this year? Is that going to happen?
It's the end of next year.
Well, I think the original plan said that traffic would be open by the end of next year, is that correct?
End of 2015.
Right.
Yes.
But the original plan, I believe, said that the actual digging would be done by this year. Can you actually meet that schedule?
The digging was originally scheduled to be completed in October of this year.
Right.
And then once we got on board, we had the machine design, we started tunneling. We were anticipating about a 14-month tunnel drive. And we started on July 30th, so that would take us to basically September of next year. So we're looking at finishing 1 to 2 months earlier than we planned in our original baseline schedule, which we submitted which we had in our proposal and which we submitted shortly after the contract commenced.
But you started digging last July.
Yes.
On a 14-month schedule.
Right.
Which would put you at the end of
September.
this year.
So can that schedule be met?
Yeah, I mean, if everything went hunky-dory, it'd be met, yeah. I mean,
Todd, political question for you. We know that STP has retained a political consultant. How is WSDOT advising partners like the city, the port, others in state government about the situation on a day-by-day basis specifically?
On a daily basis, our team interacts with STP, and we get the information that is happening, most current information. And as it changes, we put out communications to all those individuals that you just spoke of, and we attempt to put it on our webpage and attempt to do it to the media as well. And as I mentioned, for those of you that came in late, I'll say it again, we want to increase that frequency. And so we're going to have this call-in line every day at noon. Whether anything has changed or not, we're now going to make ourselves available Monday through Friday, every day at noon.
Are those other governmental and political partners, the port, the city, other people in the state, are they getting additional information than the briefings that are being posted on the website?
So can I just clarify, you had said earlier that you did not think the bearing was damaged, or you know the bearing has not been damaged? What's your level of confidence about the bearing?
we haven't seen any damage to the bearing.
But you've been able to examine it?
We've been able to observe it partially, but we're having the bearing manufacturer come here to conduct a more thorough inspection of the bearing and to recertify the bearing.
Is this the same seal problem that showed up in Japan during testing? Is it precisely the same? Is it?
No.
Can you basically explain how different it was? I mean, was it a crack seal in that case and a broken one?
No, what happened in Japan is when you set these rotating parts into the machine, they're very heavy, and what they sit in needs to have a very high structural capacity to maintain the round shape, so that when the round thing inside rotates, there's no contact. And when the machine was assembled in Japan, it turned out that the structural capacity of the surrounding housing, so to speak, wasn't strong enough, and when this heavy piece was set in there, there was some deflection. And so it became more oval instead of round, which created some spots where metal to metal came into contact. And so that was taken apart. It was structurally retrofitted to make it much stronger and to maintain that round shape that it needed to maintain. It was reassembled, again, rotated and tested, and everything worked fine. So it's something that affected the same part of the machine, but for a different reason.
Who's the bearing manufacturer?
Well, there's a supplier in Japan named Valdo.
What is it again?
Raballo, R-A-B-A-L-L-O. And the bearing manufacturer is Roth, R-O-T-H-E, and the second word is Erde, E-R-D-E. I believe they're in Germany.
You said they're gonna recertify it when?
I'm not sure when the bearing manufacturer is arriving here, but he is coming here to inspect and recertify the bearing.
And Todd, you said the replacement bearing was overseas. Where overseas? Is it what country?
I don't have the exact location.
And how big is that assembly? If you're talking about that assembly, the seal assembly, is it the right thing to call it to say it's a bearing seal assembly? Is that the correct terminology? And then how big is
Just
it?
the bearing seals.
Okay.
They go all the way around. That's a circular thing you're looking at. It's the lower thing in the bottom left picture.
Okay.
So the seals go all the way around.
That's a diameter of approximately 35 feet.
35 feet. Okay.
I'm sorry to keep harping this, I just didn't get a clear answer though, I'm not sure that I understood. The whole idea of this warranty, and pretty soon, depending on how much farther the tunnel goes, the STP is gonna have to accept the machine.
Right. Once it's gone 1,300 feet, we have the final, what we call the final reception, which is like the acceptance of the machine.
Is there a chance that you won't?
That we won't.
Accept?
We hope not. We hope that whatever is occurring now is repaired, replaced, corrected, fixed, and that from here for the next 50 rings until we get up to the 200th ring where we do the final acceptance, everything works perfectly, and we have no problem with the final reception and the final payment under the Hitachi's ozone contract.
Previously, WSDOT has said before that if it was the steel pipe, that it would be STP's responsibility because they knew where the well casings were. But now you guys are saying you're confident that it's not the well casings. So then what makes you guys confident that taxpayers wouldn't have to foot the bill if it's some other issue?
As I mentioned, we're a customer that hired a contractor. Part of our contract with them is for them to supply this machine. It's a contractor-owned machine to complete this tunnel. So we have an expectation that they would fulfill that contract, and we believe that they understand and plan to fulfill that contract as well.
We haven't presented a case that entitles us to payment under the contract, and until such time that we're able to do that, Matt's entirely correct that the state's not on the hook or responsible for any costs associated with that. So the burden's on STP to prove that to the state and to prove it under the terms and conditions of the contract. And again, that's a high hurdle to get over. And again, we're just looking at it from the contractor's perspective and seeing if there is a means under the contract for us to recover some of the costs associated with this.
Do you think that there's a case to be made for the state being on the hook if it were that well casing? If the well casing were to turn out to be a primary cause of the damage, you said you haven't presented a case yet, but do you feel that there's a case to be made that it's the state's responsibility?
Well, we don't feel that at this time, because if we did, we'd have presented the case.
When does a case get presented? During the contract or at the end of the contract? When would you actually make that argument if you did?
As soon as we're prepared to make the argument.
So it could be now, I mean, whenever.
It could be any time, right?
Along those lines, characterize how you're working through this issue right now. You're sitting together right now, you're talking about it, but you have different opinions about what could be potentially a big deal.
Right.
A very expensive.
Right.
Are you still working together? Are you lawyered up? Where are you in there?
No, we're working together. We're exchanging correspondence, we're having conversations. with any of these types of things under the contract, it proceeds over a time frame, and there's notice provided, there's a response from WSDOT, there's correspondence back and forth. We either ultimately agree or we agree to disagree, and it moves to another forum under the contract for resolution. So we're still in the very, very early part of that, and like I said earlier, the only thing we've really done is we haven't said that we haven't ruled out the pipe as a potential contributing cause to the problem that we're having now.
I'm still a little confused on timing. Last time we were told in a press release from the Department of Transportation that it would be months, is their word, possibly before the machine was able to start up, before repairs could be made, the machine could start again. And I started thinking that if it began digging in July, and your estimate is that it would be done by this fall, were that many months of shutdown factored into that schedule? It just didn't make any sense to me that if the machine is down for a total of, let's say, 4, 5, 6 months, why isn't that added on to your schedule so that the tunneling portion wouldn't be done until 2015 sometime?
Because our schedule, we have the ability to adjust our schedule, adjust our means and methods, adjust our working shifts, number of days per week.
And the speed of the machine? In terms of how far it goes each day?
No, that's basically, if we tunnel 4 hours a day or 24 hours a day, the machine's performing at the same rate. So the more hours you work, the more hours you work in a day or in a week, the more you're able to advance the machine. But it's just a function of the number of hours that you're able to work.
So it sounds like there'll be more hours, and does that mean more money spent?
Well, it will cost us more money, yes. But whether that means it costs the state more money or not.
You were saying that Hitachi Zosen will be with you through this and will do the repairs, but how, being under warranty, does it mean that they will pay for the repairs? Is that also fair to say?
No, they have an obligation to repair or replace things that get broken or damaged or become non-functioning throughout the tunnel drive. But again, it's all spelled out in our supply contract with Hitachi Zosen. So there's not a simple, clear answer for that. It's more on a case-by-case basis and see to determine whether something falls under the warranty or guarantee provisions or not.
Well, so if I buy a car or a camera or something and there's
Right.
a defective piece, that,
Right.
usually that falls under the warranty, but if I drop it,
Right.
then usually it isn't. So
Right.
is that something like what you're talking about?
Yes, yes.
So if there's a reason that the breakage happened, that's
Right.
that they're not
There's exceptions in the contract that they'll replace it unless one of the following things has occurred.
Chris, Seattle Tunnel Partners is a consortium involving a Spanish firm, a big U.S. corporation, Todd Trepanier, and possibly some others.
Yeah.
Can you talk about inside Seattle Tunnel Partners how that consortium is working? You guys, are all these firms in the consortium viewing this the same way, or is there disagreement inside the consortium, or who's leading the consortium internally for Seattle Partners?
The Seattle Tunnel Partners is a joint venture between Dragados, a Spanish firm, actually Dragados USA, which is your Dragados subsidiary here in the United States, and Todd Trepanier Corporation. And under the joint venture agreement, Dragados has 55%, Todd Trepanier has 45%. Dragados is the managing partner of the joint venture. I myself am a Todd Trepanier employee. So it's an integrated joint venture. And we have an executive committee. We have alternates to the executive committee. So there's a fairly tightly knit management structure within the Seattle Tunnel Partners organization. We meet frequently, we communicate frequently, we jointly discuss issues and make decisions. So in that respect, it's working well.
In the
Can I just interrupt for a second
contract.
for the media that's leaving? We'll continue to take questions, but for anybody that's leaving, there are pictures, there are photos, the photos that are on the wall, there are some photos on the back table, they're the same photos, so feel free to take it. If you want photos mailed to you in JPEG form, just make sure you see me and give me your email address, and I will email them to you, it's going to take the TV to that.
In the contract, there are milestones.
Yes.
And there's a
Ready?
clause in there that says the Seattle Tunnel Partners is meeting certain milestones to pay certain penalties.
Yes.
But from what I could tell, there were not milestones related to the D4 portion, D4 tunnel portion of the project. Is that true? And if there are milestones, when is the next milestone? And is Seattle Tunnel Partners?
No, there's a milestone for substantial completion.
Substantial
That's when we
completion.
put traffic through the tunnel. There's been several milestones thus far with respect to giving access to other contractors, such as the North Access contractor. And we've met all the milestones thus far under the contract.
Okay. And so the substantial completion, that means traffic through the tunnel. And
Yes.
And when was that milestone?
That's the end of December of 2015. And then final completion is in August of 2016.
Okay. And there's still about a, so as soon as you pass the date in the contract that's in December of 2015, and that's when Seattle Tunnel Partners would start paying penalties for not meeting the milestone?
Yes.
Okay.